Hello, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the ESPHome release party for ESPHome release 2021.10. Guys,
Yes,
it's easier now with the date versioning, huh? It's uh,
definitely.
yeah. So today, I first want to introduce the people here. So just that everybody kind of know who's who. My name is Paulus Schoutsen. I'm the founder of Home Assistant, um, and I help out with the ESP Home dashboard, among other things. Um, Jesse,
Yeah, Jesse here, sort of core developer for ESPHome, working for Nabukasa.
Yeah. And I'm Otto Winter. I founded ESPHome and working on it during the summer and also a bit during my university time. And yes, uh, I'm here to also talk a bit about this new release.
awesome. Yeah. So basically, with ESP Home, we normally don't really do release parties, and the reason we're doing one today is because Otto normally is based with university. But during this summer, for the last couple of months, he was working at Nabukasa on improving Home Assistant. Sorry, Home Assistant. What am I saying? ESP Home. And these are some, Otto being the founder has a thorough architectural overview of everything. So he was quickly able to make like big features in pretty short period of time. And so we did a lot of cool stuff this summer. A bunch of it is in this release. Some were already in like previous releases. So we thought it'd be good to have kind of a recap of Otto's summer, pretty much. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Um, yeah. So I mean, there's the bunch of stuff that we can talk about. What should we talk about first, guys?
I guess if we take something from the previous release, the encryption, perhaps.
Right.
So, yeah, I think I'll do this right. So, during the last release, we added support for transport encryption for the API module because, the native API that connects ESPHome and Home Assistant in a very easy way was always supposed to be very easy to use. But now we also wanted to make it very secure. So, where previously a lot of the communication was plain text, now it's fully transport encrypted with a very cool framework, the noise protocol framework. And this this has the goal to make your home really also secure because um, this is a very important thing for IoT devices. And also, obviously, ESPHome should also um, be secure. And so we looked a bit into different ways to do this. First, obviously, the normal SSL that also your browser uses, but these ESPs are very constrained devices. They don't have many resources, so we had to benchmark these different solutions, and SSL was like 1 second for the handshake for each connection, and so during this 1 second. You might may flicker and many other things may break, but using this framework, we got it really efficient and like in 10 milliseconds, the whole handshake can happen now. And yeah, uh, very excited about this.
It's by the way funny you mentioned the light flickering because we just ran into a Chromecast bug where certain TVs with Chromecast, if we were polling for new data, the TV would actually flicker. It wouldn't like be able to like the TV would stutter, like even normal TV watching. Yeah, no, the noise protocol is really cool. I think it was initially developed for WireGuard, the VPN solution, or maybe
In conjunction
WireGuard
with
came
WS.
afterwards. I'm not sure what was the order there, but yeah, it being like very low computational like means that it can like the ESP8266 is really not fast, and I think even Espressif is trying to kind of move on the ecosystem with the ESP32C3, which is like a single core variant of the ESP32, but we still have the ESP8266, and we're not going to drop support. So yeah, whatever Otto had to come up with had to also support all the old devices. So how? Actually, I don't think we have prepared a demo of the pairing of an encrypted device.
No, but it's in principle it's quite easy. So you only have this pre-shared key that you generate and put in the configuration, in the future probably also automatically, and then on the Home Assistant side you just have to paste this key. And so this is also a big advantage of using this noise protocol framework, because otherwise you'd have to mess with generating certificates and managing all that, and this also makes the setup a lot easier.
Yeah, a single longer key definitely
Yeah.
makes it easier to copy paste.
Yeah, and the way it looks in Home Assistant is that like Home Assistant will still discover this device, but when you want to establish a connection, it will prompt you for the pre-shared key or the password, basically. So yeah, no, that's awesome. I think encryption is a big win, and it's like, I think that a lot of systems by default always kind of assume your wireless network is secure, right? I think that like Sonos, Chromecast, a lot of media players definitely just, oh, you're connected, you can control me kind of thing. But with ESPHome, we don't always just send data back, right? We can allow over-the-air updates. We can control switches or send infrared commands to control other stuff. So I think it's good to have this option now. And I mean, we're going to try to make it easier even to use like than it is today. Just basically helping people either have QR codes or something to like send over this pre-shared key or get it into Home Assistant one way or the other. Cool. What shall we talk about next? Are there any questions about encryption? I don't see any. I'm looking through the comments. I don't see any questions. But if you have any questions about encryption or any topic we're talking about, just drop them in the comments on YouTube, and then we'll maybe get to it. Here's a question from Cool Duke. Is there a performance loss when using encryption?
So basically, once the connection is set up, it should be unnoticeable, especially with the amount of data that these ESPs normally exchange. It's basically nothing when I benchmarked it. The connection setup is like 10 milliseconds, but that's also one time every time it connects, but that's also like nothing. And so no, and that's obviously a big thing we looked out for. It really shouldn't affect the normal behavior of the system, just to make the device more secure.
Fabian has a question. Is it safe to run over the internet?
I wouldn't recommend it right now. I mean, obviously, you can just expose the port and things, but the whole stack of these ESPs is quite big, and it's difficult to say. I mean, we try to obviously keep everything up to date and so, but this is embedded stuff, and I don't trust the security of the low-level APIs so that you should expose it to the internet. Yeah, I mean, it's basically just to mitigate or to keep the risk low.
Basically, just don't connect your IoT stuff to the internet.
Yes.
That's
take away the I of IoT.
Yeah. Intranet of things, right?
Network of things, right? The NOT networks.
Here, Mark Jones has a question. Do you have to reset an existing device to start using encryption, or is this automatic?
So you still have to add the encryption key to your device and reinstall the newer firmware. Home Assistant will pick up that it cannot basically connect anymore to that device, and it will prompt you through Home Assistant notifications to reset it up and add the key.
Yeah, But you will keep your same entities, IDs, and that kind of stuff, right? Because
it just reestablishes the connection.
Yeah.
So basically just add a small snippet to your configuration that's also on the API configuration page on ESPHome.io, and that's basically it.
Okay, Ahmed is asking, is there an option to choose to connect securely or without? And I think here it is, if you have set up an encryption key, then you have to use encryption. There is no unencrypted connection possible anymore. Yeah,
correct.
And it also means that your Home Assistant server needs to be a recent version. I think this was added in the September release, encryption support.
October.
Yes.
October, this month.
Look, that's today's release, so last month.
The one that was already like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so you need to run a recent version of Home Assistant to support the encryption, to make use of this feature. Stefan is asking, do you have one shared key for all ESP devices?
You can. You can put it in the secrets if you want to. There's not much point. It's sort of a one-time do it, I guess. Randomly generate it once, put it in that configuration, set it up in Home Assistant once, and never have to worry about the key again, sort of thing. You can use a shared key if you want to. It's completely up to you.
Yeah, in the end, you define it into your device's YAML file, right? So if you reuse it, it's possible, but you can do individual keys per device. Oh,
I guess there's a couple more. This one, does the key replace the API password? No. Well, yes and no. It's extra on top, but we're also, I guess, with this encryption, you don't really need the API password.
Right. The thing with the API,
I guess we're thinking about removing that password in the future.
I think the thing with API password is that it is still being sent over your local internet, over your local network, unencrypted. So if an attacker is inside your network and it sees or able to capture packets between Home Assistant and your API password protected ESPHome device, it could figure out the API password.
The API password is still part of the encrypted layer. So if you have an encryption key, the API password is sent in encrypted form, but it's useless basically.
Right. Yeah, sorry, I meant before that. If you don't,
if you're not using encryption,
that's what I was talking about. But you're right. If you use encryption, API password doesn't add value. Let's see.
This one here, updating. So OTA, not at the moment. We're wanting to make sure that the API connection, is fully tested and working properly before we move to OTA, because we don't want to brick your devices.
I think the question is more, can you update it to be encrypted, the connection, without having to manually go to the device? And in that case, you just have to add it to your configuration and upload it, and that works.
Okay.
Mikhail asks, can the existing key be updated over the air?
The update mechanism is independent of the API encryption API layer. So yes.
Yeah. So pretty much, the same thing as we just said now. It's adding it and updating is the same as changing the password, really, because the API server and the OTA server are two separate servers on the SPs.
Here's a question by York. Does the encryption integrate with the Home Assistant add-on to automatically exchange the keys? It does not currently, but it is actually a nice idea where we could help you configure your Home Assistant even faster by pushing those keys up, maybe.
Well, if you're using the add-on, your configuration files are inside the Home Assistant config folder. So technically, the password is there, available to Home Assistant. So
that'd be good to make, like, we could share it around, and then
as long as you know which file to open based on that.
true. That's true. Awesome. Shall we move on to the next one? Cool. So I think the next topic we want to talk about is that we've been, for the last couple of releases, we've been working on making it easier to get an ESPHome device in your house that you didn't create yourself. So either you get one from a friend, you buy one, or whatever. And it's important that when you get an ESPHome device from someone else, how do you set it up, right? So we added improv Wi-Fi over Bluetooth Low Energy, so that like it allows you to easily configure it to your local network. We added a package identifier to the MDNS data, to the discovery data, so that it is possible to identify what device it is, even if you didn't write it yourself, and be able to kind of map it to like the author. And in this release, Otto has added a support to actually link to the open source configuration file that was used to create this version of the ESPHome device in your network, even if it's not yours. And when this is available, the ESPHome dashboard will now find it, and it will actually offer you to add it to your ESPHome dashboard, so that you can also pull in updates and that you can update it to the latest version. So actually, I have a demo of this. Let's see, live demos. It's gonna be good. So in the latest release, we have changed the ESPHome dashboard slightly. And I'm gonna see if I can actually make it a little bigger. I think it's be something like this. So this is the way the ESPHome dashboard looks. So basically, we made a few changes in this release, and I actually. Why don't I talk a bit about the dashboard, because we're looking at the dashboard right now. So a few things we have done is that the file name will only be visible now if it differs from the actual name of the device. We have moved the offline label that used to be below the name into the top right, and this is kind of like a status tag that we attach to cards, and we've made sure that we kept the text there, because we had in the past we didn't, and people that are colorblind couldn't really distinguish between what is like offline and what is not. When an update is available and the device is online, it will actually now be purple to kind of indicate that the device is online. I'm gonna see if I can fake that real quick.
Looks like you need some online devices in your house, Paulus.
Yeah, I know, but I'm also really good at faking this. No, but this is my test dashboard. So let's see if the tag reader comes online. You can now see that that like the card will indicate like, hey, there's an update available, and then of course the update button. We still show the update button even when the device is offline, because the online detection is sometimes not working properly based on people having like if they run it in a Docker container but not forwarding the MDNS stuff. Yeah, so in this case, here's Jesse's temperature monitor that I've found online. Actually, so I've already flashed it actually here. So this is a device I plugged in. As you can see, it has a new adopt button. So this adopt button, what it will do is it will create a local configuration file that has everything in it that this node has in it. And the way it works, I will show you in a bit. But so when I click adopt, it gets I get an internal server error. Oh, that's great. Well, it's broken.
It was just working this morning, wasn't it?
It's been working the whole time. Let me just restart my dev environment. This is what you get doing live demos.
Yeah. You've completely broken your dashboard now.
I have broken my whole dashboard. That's pretty good.
And maybe just show the video that
there you go. Okay.
offline.
So that connects. I'm going to press adopt, and if everything goes well, it does not. Okay. Well, so much for the live demo. What was gonna happen? Oh, you know why it's probably not working? Because I still have this one here. It's duplicate. That's a bug. Well, we found a bug. Okay, now I'm going to adopt it. And as you can see, a new card pops up in your dashboard. The discovered card was supposed to be gone, but it's not happening. I don't know why. But now, if we look at this configuration, you can see that it just refers to the open source version of this configuration. So this is a file that is in the v4 tag. So you can have different releases on GitHub. And if we go, it's referred to as a package. So it will be automatically downloaded whenever you install this this version. And I'm gonna actually go to GitHub now. This is gonna be this is a great demo day. So if we go to the v4 tag, because that's the one I have installed, you can see this is the package, and this code of this package will be automatically pulled into my local ESPHome dashboard when it starts compiling. But because it's published as a package, you can actually add extra stuff to your configuration of YAML, so you can override stuff that you don't want. So here in this case, it's a very basic one. It allows like setting up the connected to the internet or the Wi-Fi using Captive Portal or Improv. It allows over-the-air updates, API.
Yeah, so with something like this, you can, in your very minimal adopted configuration, you could re-add the Wi-Fi block and add your own credentials so that when you do update it, it will permanently have your credentials stored in the firmware. But you still get the benefits of having the published version of the configuration for that device.
Right, and so now when you're here, when you have this screen open, you can actually click install, and you can send it a new version back to this device. So when you click wireless, now it will just, as we're used to from ESPHome, compile the latest version, and then it will send it over the air to this device that I just adopted. So this means that if you are to get an ESPHome device from somebody, it means that you'll be able to receive updates. It means that you can get the latest features, bug fixes, run the latest ESPHome versions, get access to new features in ESPHome versions, because this is updatable now.
And you can choose to have those updates, unlike the other IoT platforms that just send them out.
Right. Yeah, I think that, we really wanted to make it easier, and well, as you can see, it's, hey, we're still showing the compile screen, right? Like, but it's getting easier. And
I still think that showing the screen is better in most cases, because it shows it's actually doing something. The other screen that you have installing via the browser just shows the spinner, and it's it's like, is it doing something? Can I see more details to see how far along it is, sort of thing? I don't know. I quite like being able to see that it's still doing something instead of an indeterminate spinner.
Well, I always know it's doing something because my fans of my computer spin up.
Well, they might not with your new M1 Pro.
That's true.
Right,
well,
right.
once it arrives. So yeah, I mean, now this is the way adoption works. I'm gonna stop it. I'm not actually gonna over-the-air update it. And so just to, again, this is the same configuration as that we just saw on the, that we just saw on the GitHub. And this is this is what I used to actually install it on my device here. So yeah, I mean, that's adoption, that's discovery, and I think that's going to be awesome. If you look, I mean, we have released a couple of ESPHome devices like firmware in collaboration with community members. Slimmer Laser, Home Assistant Glow. We've worked with Adano on the NFC tag reader. All those things can now actually do cool stuff. Send updates and make those available. Cool. That's the dashboard. That's Discovery. Yeah, and if you look at the dashboard, we have like the update all button and secrets. It used to be a menu. We made it now buttons when the screen is bigger. If you go smaller, it will of course still it will be like the old menu. We've got a cool animation when you adopt. It will actually. Oh, now it was already visible. Yeah, this is not a good demo day today. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's all the new stuff to the dashboard. I'm just gonna show the animation. Well, nothing is working today. Okay, whatever. That's good. Jesse, you're muted, by the way.
Was it going to scroll? Was it?
Yeah, it was supposed to scroll and show that node in the screen, but whatever.
I haven't seen that yet. So there's one question I've seen here. Where'd it go? It just moved. How do you customize a password with like a remote repo? So you can use substitutions in your packages. So if you publish a package, you can utilize a substitution in there, and you can put, say, like a dummy value in your package so that it is a valid package and compiles by itself. And then your end users can override those substitutions in their own local YAML files that are importing the package. And this will allow for that, basically. And it works for anything, not just passwords. If you have any sort of configuration values on your device, you can set that up as a substitution so that the users can override them themselves.
Tom Cassidy has a question. Does the GitHub repository have to have a specific structure for this to work?
No. It allows for a subfolder, file name, and then basically any tag. I've tried to make it as sort of generic as possible. You can have a repo with hundreds of configuration package files in there if you want. Yeah.
Basically, you just give it a path to the YAML file, and it's if you give it the right URL, it will just work.
Yeah, if you type a sort of bad URL when you're testing it out, it'll give you the format. The format's in the documentation as well for how to structure the URL, which gives you the way to structure it. But yeah, there is no real limit to how you structure that repo.
Mark Jones is asking the question. No, that's not. Sorry, Alex. Alex says, "What does dashboard import do?" So dashboard import integration. That's what does the magic. So this is where you configure this is where you configure the URL, but we have to include in the discovery so that the dashboard can pick it up.
Yeah, so behind the scenes, that integration actually takes that URL and publishes it through MDNS on the network, and that's what the dashboard actually picks up as that URL, and that can generate the local config based on that. Here, what happens if the remote package is an update? That's what the tags are for. It can be branches as well. It will, I cannot remember, I think 1 day is the default time that it will actually check the repo again. So it'll check it every 24 hours as you compile, install. But basically, if you're using something like a tag, then obviously it won't change, and you'll need to manually change the tag to get any new versions that the author has published. But if it's using branch, such as main, then it will just pull in any new changes after 24 hours. You can change that time period as well via configuration.
Yeah. And it's designed a lot like GitHub Actions. So they also have this model where you give it a tag, and the maintainer can then just say, yeah, I publish a new version to this tag, and then every user gets it.
Can move the tags around.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, the reason we're using tags and these kind of things is that we want to, sometimes you want to make a breaking change. Like if you have a new hardware revision, and so you want to make sure that the newer hardware revision configuration is not going to get pushed to the old one, breaking your ESP device. Here is Byron has asked a question. Will it work with custom components that the configuration calls on?
Yes. We have this other great feature that integrates quite closely with that, external components. And if you just put your custom component in a GitHub repository, like the same repository where the import YAML is, then and you enter the external component via YAML, like in the configuration on ESPHome.io, then it will just work. It will also just download the external component. And
Adorno has a question. Will this update work with Mac suffix? Yes, and in fact, I will show you my screen just to. So this Jesse's temperature sensor has a Mac suffix. So for the people that are unfamiliar, Mac suffix is an option you can put to your ESPHome configuration that will automatically add the last 6 digits of your MAC address of the Wi-Fi adapter on the ESPHome device to the name. This means that you can have a single binary that you can flash to many devices, and each device will show up as a unique name on your network. So that makes it very easy to have mass manufacture devices instead of having to create new configurations. And so we had initially thought that we would try to detect which configuration created these devices and kind of map them up, but in the end we decided against it. And what we do instead is that, because it might be that individual devices created of a configuration with a MAC suffix, you might want to individually tweak them and add extra stuff to it. And so what we're doing instead is that the moment you click adopt, we create a file that has the name including the MAC suffix. So there you can see Jesse's temperature monitor 6A4C58. The name, of course, is the name of the project. And if you click on edit, it shows that we just referred to this package. So if you would have 6 different devices, they can still all point at the same package. So they're all building from the same source code. That source code is shared among all your devices, but each device can be individually configured.
So I guess that leads to the same this question. What if you buy multiple, same device name and want to import? To be able to, I guess, do it nicely, the manufacturer creator really needs to use the MAC suffix for these devices. Otherwise, they will sort of conflict on your local network, even because they will broadcast the same host name, and any network device is going to get confused when it tries to talk to those ones.
And the way we've structured this system to work of discovery and adoption and import and install, it forces manufacturers that want to opt into this when they sell ESPHome devices to make their configurations public. Right? It needs to be a reproducible build that we can do locally so that people can actually see what's going into their code and what is going to be installed.
I mean, once you've adopted this device and you have a minimal config, you can go through the changing of the name and rename it to something that makes more sense for yourself. We have the name substitution that's auto created in the package, in the config. So one thing is that the package YAML really should utilize that substitution, knowing that it will be set by the user's YAML itself. And so just make it a bit more user-friendly for people to rename devices, because once you've got many of the same device, then you'll be like, well, which one's which? I can't remember which MAC address goes to which device.
All right. Are there any other questions? Is it available already? Yes. Jesse tagged the release just before the stream. So
well, I'm going through the actual October release now. I keep getting stuck in the questions and forgetting to follow the prompts on the computer to actually make the release.
So almost.
But it should be out in the next couple of minutes. The actual publishing doesn't take long.
Right. Do we have any manufacturers in the pipeline? So right now there's a couple of companies that are selling ESPHome devices with ESPHome firmware. I think that the ones that we closely work with are the Slim Laser, which is the P1 port reader from Zuidwijk, Marcel Zuidwijk, which we released together with the Home Energy Management, and with Adano, the creator of the NFC tag reader. I think there is a Chinese company that is starting to selling plugs and a whole bunch of different things. And actually, to kind of streamline this, we've also recently introduced the Made for ESPHome label. So that's a label that people are allowed to put on their projects to kind of show like, hey, this is made for ESPHome and it will work for ESPHome. We actually even created a very cool looking label here. So this is we have some requirements. We might want to update like we already say that the requirement to have them made for ESPHome is that it needs to be open source your configuration. Like if people want to sell ESPHome products but they don't want to open source their configuration, then we couldn't care less. I think in the end for us, what is important is that like the reason we're doing all this, right? Like why are we like building all this while other manufacturers are like selling products? Is that we believe is that like what we're doing with ESPHome here, what we're making available is that we all are getting more options for local and private home automation. And in the end, any device that you have that works locally and works awesome with Home Assistant is also better for Home Assistant users. So in the end, like every day we invest in, and every line of code we invest in ESPHome benefits like local home automation, and so that's why we're doing it. So here's the example of how it looks on the PCB. I don't think I've seen a physical photo yet of anyone having this on their PCB.
Not yet.
So here we can see intermit tag, which is well known from the WLED controllers, also has some analog controllers for ESPHome. So yeah, definitely just send an email and we'll go through the process. Well, we'll just check your requirements. Let's see. Well,
so there's this question, will there be a registry for device configs? We thought about it at the beginning, and that's something I was thinking about doing, but then Otto came up with the amazing idea of the dashboard import. And basically the device says, here's my config on the internet, go and get it. So it makes it a lot easier for people to just put those devices out there with their configs.
Right. Yeah, this is actually great. This is way better. Jesse and I originally talked about it, of maintaining our own repository with files of pre-approved projects and etc. And it's just a lot of work. So this is a lot better approach. Okay, I see a nice question that is a nice bridge, I think, to the next topic. Do you plan to support the ESP32H2?
We've been working on that a little bit. Yeah, ESP32H2 is, we still don't have the hardware to test it, but this thing we worked on this release, and it was a very big effort, is a great step in that direction. So one big feature we did was a very big refactor of the ESPHome core because before we always used Arduino as the base framework for all operations. So like all hardware operations turning on this pin or reading something were always done via this Arduino framework. However, that was broken in some cases on some specific ESP chips, and also it's not the closest, the most down to the hardware that we can be. So instead, we now refactored a bunch of stuff so that we can build directly on ESP-IDF, which is the framework that that Espressif, the makers of the ESP chips, officially produce. And it's the official framework for the ESP32s. We don't use it for ESP8266 because it doesn't exist there. But yeah, so there was a very big refactor where, well, during the development cycle, a lot of stuff broke, but we think we hope most of it is fixed by now. And yeah, so this has maybe not so much immediate effect for the users, but it is a big architectural thing that's forced us to be more consistent with our base abstraction layers, and will help us in the future, and also help us do exactly this, support these ESP32H2 chips.
Yeah, so an example of why this helps is that things like the C3 chip, you could not use the ESP32 Arduino framework because it is not compiled. Well, the C3, yes, in version 2, but we don't update. We also don't update the Arduino framework for the ESP32 very often. Last time we updated it, it actually broke a couple of the internal components, and there were bugs in the actual framework itself. And so, yeah, so we've sort of moved away from relying on that now. And yeah, for things like these, we'd had to actually recompile the whole Arduino framework ourselves in a fork and publish that so that we could use it for these extra chips. But now with ESP-IDF, that just takes that all away, and we just go direct. Yeah.
But I think that also the most important reason for this refactor is that, we were talking to Espressif a month or two ago, and they said, like, listen, he said, I have 3 people working on the Arduino framework library, and we either have to use the Arduino Espressif version, or you have to use the IDF Espressif version to talk to ESP devices. And he said the resources on the IDF is just a lot more. It's the future. It will make sure you have all the chips. And basically he said, just go to IDF. So that's what we're doing. And it just means, whenever a new chip drops, support might land like really soon in ESPHome. Here's a question for you, Otto, from Stefan.
Does using the ESP-IDF directly make the firmware binary smaller? I haven't checked it, but in theory it should be that way, because right now the way Arduino works for ESP32s is it itself uses ESP-IDF internally. So you have multiple layers, and now we
cutting out the middleman.
use ESP-IDF. Yes, exactly. And so in theory, it should be possible to make it smaller. I don't know if it is, but it certainly should be possible.
Yeah, and so I think right now, if you just download the new version of ESPHome, nothing changes yet. You have to opt into the IDF changes, right?
Yeah, that's just because it's quite new, and we don't want to break people. And I mean, in the future, we could think about making it default, but right now, by opting in, we learn a lot, and yeah.
Yeah, and there's still a few components that don't work with IDF because they rely solely on Arduino libraries, which we can't use with the IDF framework.
And the way we would make it the default is that we would just, when you create a new configuration, we would automatically enable it for IDF, like opt-in at that line. It wouldn't be that your old configuration will have now target IDF when you start recompiling it, of course, right? Because it's not our goal ever to like break your ESPHome configs in a new version.
And maybe
Unless
to
we
give
want
a,
Yeah.
and to give maybe a teaser for what this also enables. I also made some prototypes based on this huge effector. Now it should be more easy to support other platforms like other STM chips or something. We're not looking into doing it right now, but in the future, this refactor should be a huge step in that direction. So for example, maybe, I don't know why you would do that, but on a Raspberry Pi, you could just run ESPHome on the Raspberry Pi itself. So like what is usually on the ESP chip, which might be something.
No, that's going to be really cool. It might even make like automated test and development easier, right? We can just run it on x86. Yeah. Cool. Well, that also answers the Avant-Dark's question. Yes, other hardware are possible.
Yeah, so there's one developer that was working on the STM32s to get ESPHome ported, and it's all before this refactor. So after this refactor, he's got a lot of work to change his code, but it was working. Like ESPHome did run on the STM32 chips, so that's one thing that's already external, I guess.
Yeah. It's not good for our name, but well.
Yeah.
Figure it out. Yeah. Yeah, and so I just want to also remind everybody that like if you like what we're doing and you want to like support our development work, the best way to do is to subscribe to Home Assistant Cloud by Nabukasa. That basically helps fund both Home Assistant and ESPHome developers to work on it full time. Both Jesse, Otto, and me are all paid by Nabukasa. So, and Nabukasa is not some big evil corporation. It's actually, I'm the founder of Nabukasa, as I am the founder of Home Assistant, and there's no external money, investors, all that stuff, right? Basically, we only work for our users, and like that's what we do, right? We build cool local home automation that is private by design, and so if you want to fund our work, definitely subscribe to Home Assistant Cloud. Here's somebody asking, why don't we charge €5 instead of $5 for Home Assistant Cloud? That's a great question. We are actually going to support euros soon, but it's a bit more involved than just changing the currency. Yeah, so if there's, I don't know if anyone has any other questions. In the meantime, Marcel sent me a photo of the made for ESPHome on top of printed on top of a PCB. So this is how it looks, for example.
Nice.
Yeah, and well, let me just drop in the other picture as well. Yeah, the other side looks like this, but no logo there.
No space for a logo on that side.
Let me see. Somebody's asking. I'm just gonna pick some other random questions. Is there any update planned for Captive Portal? No.
It works.
Yeah. I mean, there is some other things planned. Actually, we could talk about this. So, if people remember, maybe you don't, we launched Improv Wi-Fi a couple of months ago. Improv Wi-Fi is a way to use Bluetooth to send over Wi-Fi credentials to ESPHome devices, but we actually made it an open standard so that other projects can adopt it too. And the cool thing is, because it's based on Bluetooth, we can actually allow people to configure their ESP devices from the browser, or it will be from like mobile apps. The goal is to get added to the Home Assistant apps. However, while we were developing this, we were talking like, WLED. We worked a lot with Eric Cookie, the founder of WLED. And he said, well, right now I cannot add this to WLED because it requires pulling in the full Bluetooth stack just for getting it online. And so we realized that's kind of annoying, right? Because people are like, if people are not making it easy to get connected to Wi-Fi, then it's kind of annoying. And so one of the things we noticed actually with WLED especially is that it's, people will install it. And actually there's nowadays a cool web-based installer that WLED uses. This is based on our ESPHome web tools. And so we realized, like, well, if we already have a serial connection open to the device and we're installing new firmware on it, we can actually send over the credentials as well for the Wi-Fi. I think it was actually Otto's idea. And so we are actually in the process of building this. The ESPHome site is actually already done. And so the way this whole flow is going to work is that if you click install, it will ask you for your serial port. It will install the latest firmware. In this case, it will be WLED, but it could also be ESPHome. Then, once the device is installed, we will soft reset it so that it boots into the ESPHome firmware or into the WLED firmware. We can then send the Wi-Fi credentials over serial. The device will connect to Wi-Fi. It will report back to the website like, hey, I am connected to the internet, and this is my IP address, and then we can send you to that device for further configuration. So we see, especially with devices like WLED and Tesmoda, both of them require manually configuring stuff in their web interfaces, right? Compared to ESPHome, where we do everything before we create the firmware. But this new way of setting things up will definitely help WLED and Tesmoda, and of course any other firmwares that are out there. And this is, again, it's just our goal to just everything, make it easier to use ESP devices, make it easier to run local home automation stuff. And then lastly, the new serial protocol is going to be published under the Encryption standard. So Encryption Wi-Fi will have a Bluetooth low energy version and a serial version coming soon to the internet, and then I don't know, maybe in a month or something, I think. Alex is asking, will web serial logging be a feature in the future? We haven't actually looked into it. It could be. I mean, I don't think it would require any real work, right? It's just so yeah.
I think it would be good because some people for debugging, especially in Discord, we ask people a lot to get the serial logs for a device, and so for most people that means plugging it in, downloading the ESPHome flasher, and then pulling the logs from there. It's not the best experience, so it'd be nice for them to be able to just go back into the dashboard and get the logs straight from the browser. So I think it's something, we definitely will do. It's just when is the question.
Right. Cool. So here's a question of Jesse G. Could Otto tell us how ESPHome came about?
Stefan actually asked the question earlier.
Yeah, a couple of people did. I mean, it's a longish story, but so the main thing was I have this cabinet at home where I put light strips everywhere to control, to make it do nice things. And so I wrote a firmware for it, initially using my sensors, I think it was. And then I had other devices in my home. But with my sensors and a lot of these solutions, you have to each time write a new firmware, a new code base, which is very annoying. So I gave up on that for a while, but then at some point I got these ESP chips and saw, oh, this is very nice to use. So basically, I started writing some library that would help me do basic tasks like I have this DHT sensor, so just create the sensor object and everything else like MQTT and so will be done in the background. And wrote on that during school time most often, or during breaks, I should say.
That's
At
good.
some
In case your
point, I
teacher is
really
listening, you're like, no, I was working on it in the break. That's good.
yes, exactly. Yeah, I had a lot of free time during school back then, but yeah. So at some point, I open sourced it under ESPHome lib, as it was called back then, and put it on the Home Assistant community forums.
And just back then, you were already a Home Assistant. You were part of the Home Assistant team, right? Back then, I think.
I don't know the order, but it was very closely with the order. Yeah.
Actually, I've pulled up your original blog post. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the blog post where I announced it. Yeah, and back then it was basically just like you had to write code to use it, but it was very shorthand, like init Wi-Fi, where you say, yeah, this is my SSID and this is my password, and everything else is done by the library. So yeah, at some point, I don't know where I got the idea from, but I got the idea that you could do it like Home Assistant. You have a configuration YAML file there where you just put this stuff, and so you don't have to write any code anymore. And I thought about it for a while and thought, this is maybe a bit difficult. But then during a weekend, I had this a lot of time free, and I thought, let's do this. And I wrote basically all of the code generation system of ESPHome, and that went actually pretty fast. Yeah, and so after basically just a weekend, I open sourced this, and this just used the library I had created before. Just created this tool. Just created the C++ code for it, and yeah, from there it just grew bigger, and lots of people use it, and that was great. And yeah, so after that
Now we're here.
it grew, and
Yeah.
now we're here.
But yeah, it's a very ESPHome is very complicated in that it has two programming languages which are deeply intertwined, right? So there's this, it generates C++ and it compiles into a firmware, and this runs on your microcontroller. But then there's all the converting a YAML file, configuration YAML file into C++ code is actually being done by Python. So there's a whole Python application. And then nowadays on top of it sits a dashboard. So there's also a whole JavaScript or TypeScript stack creating configuration files, converting it to C++. So it's a really complicated stack, and it's really, really impressive what Otto has done.
But
big
the
respect.
nice thing to the end user, it's really easy to use. At least I hope so.
Right.
You just have to write this configuration, and all this complexity is hidden away from.
Yeah. But you can still access that complexity if you want in your YAML files. Like you can still, the advanced users can still write quite a bit of custom code inside of the YAML, which seems a bit weird, but it works.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, when I need to program an ESP device, right, like I just use ESPHome. Like I don't even want to deal with the Arduino library editor and like pulling in like the right packages and stuff. It's just the cliff to get started there is just like, no, I'll just stick to ESPHome. I mean, nowadays, almost like every component sensor you can buy on AliExpress is there, right? Like it just works.
There's a lot that isn't, but it's not hard to add new ones. Yeah, there are new ones being added all the time, so it's good. I think this release has just go up. I think there's 9 new components or so. Yeah, various different types as well. So
Yeah, and I think, to kind of finish this story is that Nabukasa has acquired ESPHome. When was it, Jesse? March,
March,
I
April.
think. Yeah, so Otto got really busy with university, and
Nobody could get in touch with him.
but we felt that ESPHome is such a good complement to Home Assistant and to the private smart home, and we felt like we really wanted to invest more time in it, but we also knew that we couldn't hire somebody to work full time on ESPHome and then still require volunteers like Otto then in his spare time to approve the work of a full time employee. That didn't really work. So we got in touch with Otto. We were like, well, can we acquire it? We will, carry the banner. We will keep, going with the same vision he had. Is like making it easy for people to create local home automation devices. And so yeah, we acquired it from Otto. Jesse was already involved with ESPHome. He was already one of the people doing development, and so we hired Jesse, and he's now working full time on ESPHome. So if you see, that's why nowadays, whenever we add something to Home Assistant, and we've been adding a lot of small features left and right to kind of make things tighter integrated with ESPHome, it's like we can release on both sides. So for example, when Home Assistant launched energy management, well, ESPHome was ready to provide the right data points to actually be used in energy management, and so we see this more tighter collaboration, and and it's going really well. And I'm really happy that Otto still has decided to, join us for the summer and actually make some of these bigger architectural changes, and yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and also want to thank you very much for the opportunity to also work this summer on these features. That was very nice.
Anytime.
Yeah, it's been really good having you around for that time. Being able to bounce things off and stuff like that.
All right. Are there any other questions from the audience? We gotta wait 30 seconds before the.
It's actually a lot quicker than that. I've noticed recently. I see them popping up pretty fast in the chats.
Well, maybe YouTube is faster.
I actually think I see them pop up faster in StreamYard than YouTube chat. I see a few people asking about LoRa and LoRaWAN. I don't know. I think there are custom components or PRs, draft PRs open for LoRa for those components. But I don't know. It's something that would be quite specific, I guess, for specific use cases.
Yeah. I mean, when you do it LoRaWAN, most of the use cases I can think of using LoRa is these are very long range, right? I think you can reach 2 kilometers or something.
Well, that's what LoRa means.
Right. But generally these devices are battery powered, right? So if I were to create a LoRaWAN device, I don't know if I would just go deeply directly into C, so you can tweak the energy usage, go into a deeper sleep. And these are not, with ESPHome, you're working a layer higher, which is a lot more convenient. But I don't know if you can get the best and the maximum things out of your battery using ESPHome compared to just.
Well, ESPHome does support the full deep sleep modes that exist on the ESPs, so it is possible. But yeah, starting I guess the way that ESPHome devices boot up, they start up everything. They they don't care about power usage when they're actually running, and so that's where you gain a bit more doing it directly as opposed to.
But it's very difficult to create or lay out a PCB that is very energy efficient, and so I've tried it a couple of times, and it's always you have this residual current that goes somewhere, you don't know where, and so especially for DIY devices, I wouldn't recommend it. Like I personally also, for battery devices, I just use Zigbee EKS stuff because it just works.
Frank would like to have a mobile data support. That'd be cool. They could just plug it into your car, but there's enough power there at least.
I mean, there is an SMS module, the SIM 800L, but it's not mobile data. Yeah. I mean, in principle, it's possible. Somebody just needs to create it, and also, I think I haven't looked into it, but it's probably a bit difficult to integrate it into the networking stack. But yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else? I'm just looking around to see what kind of ESPHome device I have laying around, but yeah. So if anyone has any final questions,
This one here. So yeah, node-to-node communication between ESPHome devices. Yeah, it comes up a lot.
I mean, a version of that is already being worked on. What is it called? The API client, PR. I mean, the bigger thing is, at least in my mind, I have that at some point maybe we could extend the whole API layer to be to do much more, to support many topologies, like having a central server like MQTT that has some advantages, or even creating hops, like going from LoRa to an ESP chip and then to Wi-Fi. And ideally, I would like all these things to just work out of the box without having to do a manipulation of strings or something by the user. But that's just could be quite. It's a big project, and yeah.
I think that like node to node, it's well at least like obviously Zigbee and Z-Wave supports like node to node network, right? Because they have a mesh network, and the amount of people that use it in Home Assistant is very, very little because it's just a lot more complicated to set up and it's not very accessible. Yeah, I think that like maybe you can communicate through Home Assistant. That'd be interesting, where you just like read out the state machine. I think you can already do that, I guess. So that kind of works.
Yeah, I mean, using the API, you can actually create a service on, or even switches. You can toggle them directly from your ESPHome configuration, like from one device directly to another. It goes it's not directly. It goes through Home Assistant and uses the Home Assistant services and event bus and whatnot. But you can write configurations that talk through Home Assistant without actually putting anything in Home Assistant. You don't have to configure anything inside Home Assistant except for adding your devices. So that can be, quite an easy, simpler way of doing it. Since these devices are on Wi-Fi already, there are a few sort of things, questions, I guess, around ESP now, which is Wi-Fi mesh for ESPs. There is a PR open. It's been open for a while now. I don't know.
I mean, the thing with those features is it doesn't integrate very much into the ESPHome ecosystem. It's like you still have to manually construct the message you want to send and parse it on the other side, and that's just not something the user should be exposed to. Like an external component, it's okay, but we are creating user experiences, and there it should really be a good method.
Here's a question: what's the roadmap for ESPHome in 2022? And we just go with the flow. I think short term, we're definitely gonna add the new entity category. Expose that. It's being added to Home Assistant right now. Will be the next release. they'll be added to the next ESPHome release. But yeah, that's kind of it. It's really also, we would love to do some more stuff. Maybe at least I would love to see maybe make it easier to do e-ink screens or something, to have like, an e-ink screen showing Home Assistant data somewhere in your house is something that I think would be really cool. But I don't know if that's, it's not per se on the roadmap. But I know Jesse is working on it, so it's really cool.
Well, this is the ink plate. So it was a crowdfunded display that's e-ink, and they recycle the Kindle displays into these. But it's got an ESP32 on the board, on the PCB.
Nice.
And so it all works nicely with ESPHome. You can put whatever you want on there. But yeah, e-paper, like the wave share displays are supported already, so it's quite easy. There's a new in this release. I think it's in this release. There's a new graphing library for displays, so we can show graphs on those displays using sensor data. The ESPHome device will keep a history of the sensor data points in memory, and we'll be able to draw a graph for things like that. The upcoming NS panel from ITED, definitely want to get one of those working, because that's a nice all-in-one panel that just goes on your wall as a display, 2-button touchscreen display, 2 buttons. That would be really good to have something like ESPHome on.
Right, it looked like the headers we just exposed, right? It will be easy to install ESPHome on. I think from what I read, somebody was doing a breakdown that at least they use a custom protocol between the screen or something and the ESP device or something.
Well, it's from what I've seen, it's the Nextion protocol, which we already support. But some people have said that it's not exactly the same. But yeah, they've Sonoff or ITED have released all the pin specifications as well. So yeah, it should be not too difficult, hopefully, to get it working. We'll just have to wait and see.
Right. Cool. Well, I guess that's let's see, that's kind of it. I guess Otto, Jesse, any final words?
No, the release is out.
I hope you liked the release, and
yeah, it's out there. Definitely give us some feedback on all the changes we've made, on all the dashboard changes that Paulus has made. We're definitely trying to make things easier. So,
right.
Yeah.
So thanks everybody. If you like us to do more release parties, just leave a comment and then maybe we can consider it. Again, if you want to fund the development of ESPHome, you can subscribe to Home Assistant Cloud at nabukasa.com. That directly funds Jesse to work full-time on ESPHome, and also pays me to help with the dashboard stuff and the UI, UX. So yeah, thanks for everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.